over to you.
All right, so I have a script. So welcome to the second panel. Thank you for your time joining Evolving Graphic Design Symposium. My name is Taegyum, and I'm the moderator of Evolving Creative Coding session. We have 3 presentations with 7 presenters. Alex Braidwood is a sound artist, media designer, and educator who maintains a practice exploring issues of sustainability at the intersection of art and science. Yeohyun An is award-winning artist, designer, educator, and researcher integrating creative coding, digital fabrication, physical interaction, and diversity into experiential graphic design. Mihyun Kim is a designer, an artist, and an educator. She is currently an assistant professor of communication design at the School of Art and Design at Texas State University. Also, Catherine Pena, Tyler Rico, Shenyao Zhu, and Jennifer Seward are MFA in communication design candidates at Texas State University. We'll have a live Q&A at the end after 3 presentations. So you can unmute yourself and ask questions later. Also, feel free to leave your questions in the chat. We will keep track of your questions. So first presenter is Alex Braidwood.
Thank you, everyone. All right, so we've met. My name is Alex Braidwood. Just to get it out of the way, and I'll remind you again at the end, my Instagram is Listening Instruments. My website is alexbraidwood.com if you want to learn more about what I do after this. So what I'm going to talk about today is my work with code and sound and graphic design. So I've got a quick sound check here. So in the room, we can hear it. For everybody tuning in, hopefully you can hear kind of an ambient swelly sound. There's going to be a little bit of sound later, so I just wanted to do a quick sound check. I like to give a little bit of framework to how my work operates in the world, and I do that sort of through the positions that I do and the way in which I've sort of built out the activities that I like. So part of what I do is I'm the director of graduate education for graphic design at Iowa State. I'm also the director of the Artist in Residence program at Iowa Lakeside Lab, and I'm faculty in the Human-Computer Interaction PhD program. So if I think about these 3 things, for me, like graphic design is about engaging people, the work at Iowa Lakeside Lab is about ecology and sustainability, and HCI is really about technology. So if you triangulate those things, my work sits at the center of those. So I wanted to start out by talking about these posters that I made as part of my teaching practice. So when I teach seniors who are about to stop being students and start being professional graphic designers, probably for the first time in many of their lives, they're experiencing this idea of not being a student, I give a weekly sermon. Sermon is just a chance for me to talk about something that I'm interested in, something design, something professional, something maybe even like off the wall, just to throw some ideas out there, things that I think they should know, things that I think are important. Maybe they don't exactly fit into a project or a piece of the curriculum. And the reason why I'm showing this is because I used these posters as a way to push my own practice in a variety of different ways. So this is one of them. It's called Creativity is Not Evenly Distributed. It's a reference to an idea that Questlove brings up in his book, Creative Quest. And the way that I built this poster was by exploring code and how code could do some of the design for me. So I had this idea where I wanted the word creativity to not be evenly distributed. Well, I'm not going to go in and play with the tracking and the kerning and all this. It would start to be really like laborious. It would start to be kind of patterned. So instead, I made a script to do it. And so I wrote some code that starts to build out these assets. I ran it through a bunch of different fonts, a bunch of different formatting, some different play with how the structure would come together. And then I created this poster to go along with the talk that I was giving to students about how sometimes people have to flex their own muscles in different ways when they're trying to be creative. We don't all come from the same place, and therefore we don't all have the same, what we would call creativity. Some people have to work harder at it than others, but it's always worth putting in that work. So that was this idea of creativity is not evenly distributed. The other one that I wanted to point out and bring your attention to is one that's called Chase the Right Carrots. These students, they're seniors, they're about to graduate, they've been students for the majority of their life, and that's what they know. And so they've become very grade focused. And as educators, I think we all know that a lot of times grades signifies people who are good at being a student, but doesn't necessarily mean they're good at being a graphic designer or a designer in general. So this is a poster a sermon that I created along this idea of like, don't get hyper focused on the grade. Your GPA will not get you your job, your work will. And so I took all the GPAs from that particular class and wrote code that would then like generate these different compositions with it, printed these out as large posters. I walk in, I hang them up, I give the talk, I answer questions and things like that. The reason why I'm pointing some of this out again is because using code as a designer is something that I've done to really push against my weaknesses. That poster series was about it, and I've done it all along, and it's become this opportunity to create things that I wouldn't be able to create otherwise. I'm not great at color, I'm not great at type, so I can start playing with those things with programming. So that brings me to what I really want to talk about, which is my performance series. It's called MASS, which is the mechanism for actualizing speculative soundscapes. This is a piece that's in the show that's related to this symposium. And the idea here is I really wanted to figure out a way to get people to care about and listen to nature sound. I love going out. I go out in the wilderness. I make these long form recordings. I take my recording equipment with me backpacking. I do a lot of different investigations out in nature, and I record these sounds, and I love them. And I love creating different ways for people to experience them. We don't need to buy any more soundtracks of nature, right? I mean, every truck stop is already like, you know, these things are out in the world. We have so many opportunities to just like experience, you know, different sort of like ambient sounds and nature sounds and things like that. And so I don't need to put another like CD out in the world. Oh, I dated myself. I don't need to put another streaming audio file out into the world that is nature sound. So what else can I do to get people to find interest in this? So I developed this idea of a performance that would operate under the energy level and the activity of what is called a dawn chorus. So a dawn chorus is a time in the wilderness when everything is waking up. It starts a little bit before sunrise, goes through sunrise, and then everything sort of settles into the day. And so I used this as a format in order to determine how the composition of the audio is going to come together. This is what's sort of experienced or sort of what's shared in the exhibition down in the show. So the idea here is this is a spectrogram. This has like high frequency, low frequency levels of activity. I've kind of graphed out where the sunrise is, where daylight happens, just to give a sense of like what this means. It happens anywhere from like 40 minutes to about an hour and a half, depending on where you are in the world, what season it is, things like that. And all of these are the things that I used to determine how the performance was going to come together. So I started, building this out. It was at the beginning of the pandemic, so I was doing it in like a streaming format. I set it up so I was doing one of these every single week, and I thought, oh, I'll do it every week for like a month. That'll be interesting, 4 in a row. I ended up doing it for 7 months, nearly every Sunday, a new one. And they started out really rough and raw, and it was just a platform for me to play with stuff. It was super low pressure. I was just streaming to the internet on a couple of different platforms. They started out with themes. I then ended up moving along and really playing with how these sounds could come together and create a different kind of listening experience, especially when people were struggling with getting outside. I live in Iowa. It got really cold that winter. It was really hard to get outside. So I framed it as this idea of bringing a little bit of outside to your inside. And the idea then grew to have not only the audio component, but the visual component. And that's another level of where the creative coding comes in. The visuals are all driven by the 12 channels of audio that are coming off of the mixer. And the nerdery about how that all comes together is something we could probably talk about in some of the socializing time. But the primary idea is it's ambient sounds, it's nature sounds that I've recorded from places like when I was a resident in Australia, when I was an artist in residence in Isle Royale National Park, when I'm at Lakeside Lab, all around the Midwest, Yellowstone National Park, and bringing those into a new place where I'm turning them into synthesized sounds. I'm playing them naturally. I'm also then like manipulating them through some of the technology. I also bring in these ideas of like pausing, breathing, listening from the introduction of self-help and self-hypnosis records from the 50s, 60s, and 70s. So there's a language component to it as well. They've come together in a variety of different ways. The other thing that's happening as this performance goes on is as you watch, you'll notice eventually the graphics blank out. What's happening there is it's being saved as a high-res vector file. So every 90 seconds, what's being drawn is saved. so that not only do I have an audio record of the performance, but I also have a visual record as well. So these forms build out, they draw in, they're all being driven by the sounds that are happening. That blanking out means it saved it as a vector file. It started another one. So then I end up with all of this artwork. Again, a bit of my weakness. I'm not great at drawing forms myself, but what I really enjoy doing is playing around with systems that draw forms for me and then saving them and iterating on them when they get to be something that I like, something that I think fits, something that seems like it has the right vibe. So then also each performance ends up having a visual record. So here's a book of a performance that I did for a sound art group out of Los Angeles at an event called Sound Pedro. So it was a sound art festival. It's normally in real life. These couple of years it was done virtually. So I was part of their like virtual programming, and each spread represents 90 seconds of the stream that I did for them. So then I ended up with this, like, again, this like physical archive as a result. Oh, this is my favorite because there's some really quiet spots in this performance. There's spots where I'm like really bringing things down and really wanting people to relax and listen. And like, it's just like crickets and, you know, little bits of synthesizers and things like that. So the results are almost nothing visually. And I find that kind of beautiful in its own way. So I've also done something where like, I had this opportunity to help bring some attention to a building that was about to be renovated. So these were all generated in that same way, but using all sounds captured from around Iowa. So bringing some prairie wildlife into the city of Des Moines to help sort of like just very quickly revitalize the visuals of this. So, okay, cool. That's a performance. You do it in galleries, you did it on the internet. That's super neat. However, as a graphic designer, there's so many other ways we get to engage with people. So that first video that I showed, I put that on social media, and some folks who worked for Gibson were like, hey, we've started this campaign called Shape Your Sound for these new guitar pedals that are coming out. Do you think you could take those guitar pedals and like make visuals from them so we can actually see the sound? So I worked with an agency out of Detroit called Decal with Maestro over the course of about a month to develop a whole series of algorithms where each guitar effect pedal, based on the different characteristics and tones of what that pedal produces, creates different drawings. And all of these drawings were then generated as high-res vector and motion. And what I think is really useful about this as a process is that it was very experimental. They didn't know what they want. This was not code and programming as an element of production. This was code and programming as a creative tool in your toolbox. They didn't come to me and say, we need it to look like this. Can you write the code to do it? Instead, they were like, let's just keep going until it looks cool and we like it and it fits and then people are into it. So these were some of the results of what a distortion looked like, what a chorus looked like, what a fuzz tone looked like. If anybody's familiar with guitar culture and guitar effect culture, the fuzz tone is the first guitar effects pedal. The person who made that invented this idea that we just see pervasively across rock music. And so then all of those assets were used in their online media, their print, they did merch, they did all these things. And the main point of this is that it started with a big question of like, what can we do with the code? So I just generated a ton of these over the course of a few days, and we just went from there. So then we used the forms that were on the pedals themselves and started like playing around with the colors, because the colors and the graphics on the pedals had already been determined. They were that far along in production. And so taking this idea of play and experimentation and code as a creative tool into the world of advertising and marketing had this whole other reach that we weren't expecting, including client excitement, which led to the development of a website that you could load and you could talk, scream, play your own guitar into it, and it would play back their version, different versions of their logo along the way. So that was the Maestro Shape Your Sound. It was all based on the same idea of taking sound, turning it into visuals, that can be print, motion, and exist in a whole variety of spaces. So if any of that sounds interesting, if you're curious at all, my website is alexbraidwood.com. You can go on there, you can find out a bunch more of what I do. So thank you all for listening.
All right, so second presentation is by Mihyun Kim, and MFA candidate. And I believe we have the video.
Great.
Great. Wait.
Hello, my name is Mi-hyun Kim. I'm Assistant Professor of Communication Design at Texas State University. Today I'm going to introduce a few of my student outcomes from Generative Design course and Conditional Design workshop. This is from Conditional Design workshop called Procedural Mural during the MFA residency at the end of fall 2021. The workshop was a participatory mural installation that focuses on logic and process using intangible computational rule created by the workshop participants. Generative Design course introduced the basics of generative art and design and utilized code as a creative medium to expand the current curriculum to be a critical, imaginative, and expressive reconsideration of technology and its possibility. While students engage in computation through a creative, thoughtful, and transformative approach, students learn the potential of programming in the field of communication design and expand the boundary of traditional graphic design. Learning to program and engage the computers more directly with the code opens the possibility to create not only tools, but system, environment, and new code of expressions. This programming education is vital for students to experiment with the new ways of seeing, being, and relating, as well as learning multifaceted and interdisciplinary approaches to visual design. And some of the class outcome will be shared in the presentation.
Hello everyone, my name is Catherine Peña, and today I would like to share with you my generative design project inspired by Kyo's space-type generator. My idea for this project was to create awareness for diabetes distress and to essentially create an interactive tool where users can express how they feel living with diabetes. Here, the user is given a fill in the blank where the user can choose to type what they feel is appropriate. Next, the user can adjust the following sliders based on how they feel living with diabetes. As you can see, each slider will create a different typographic motion. A person with diabetes may feel overwhelmed, anxious, confused, stressed, or frustrated, keeping up with the daily demands of managing their blood sugars. Next, the user is given the option to select colors based on their current mood, which will alter the background and text. Finally, the user can save the image. When sharing this code with people living with diabetes, I found that not all responses were negative, but rather neutral. I also found that users were more open to share with me their personal stories of what it's like to live with this condition. Learning to program helped me create a tool for the diabetes community, which can potentially be used as an online support system for normalizing diabetes distress and to prevent these feelings from progressing to depression. As a designer and as a dietitian, programming is a great way to create an online resource and support system to help make an impact for our community.
Hi, my name is Tyler, and I'm going to talk briefly about the projects I worked on in generative design class. The first was a generative poster, and this poster utilizes these images of ferns that I took this past winter, as well as a poem written response that's cut up into the code, and then P5 loads 3 images at random and a random snippet of the text, and this blue screen occasionally per click. So if we jump over to P5, you can see this in action. The second project we worked on was a kinetic type project. And this project utilized some code that we received during a kinetic type workshop as the basis for RESO printed publication. So I wrote this phrase, watching you, watching the storm. And then I took these 2 images, one of a bird and one of a storm clouds, and used these to make separate wave layers using this code to then export and print on the RESO. So the form of the book sort of loops this phrase in and out, watching you, watching the storm. The last project I worked on was a data self-portrait. And this project utilizes these images of the sky that I took each morning in July for the past 2 years, and then used P5 to find the color pixel, the color data from the center pixel of the image, and that was layered on top along with the timestamp for each image. So this is 2020, and this is 2021. So I'm hoping to print these soon. Thank you.
Expresses your emotions in shape is about creating kinetic typography with motion and interaction. It visualizes the user's emotions by simulating the process of making ceramic. My topic is about the visual experience of Chinese characters. As the earliest known form of Chinese writing, the Oriental bone script is characterized by its pictorial nature. It was created based on the people's observation of their surroundings and their own understanding. When language cannot explain emotions, Oriental bone scripts with a pictorial nature are easy to explain. In this project, I used the Oriental bone script representing emotions as pictures. I choose happy, angry, sad, and satisfied for the user to choose from these 4 emotions. Users will make their own ceramics by controlling the slider according to their emotions. I hope users can express their emotions through this interaction process. Expresses your emotions in shape use the cylinder effect in P5JS by simulating process of making ceramic. It is discussed that in addition to Chinese characters covering information in the form of text, the visual experience brought by the form of the images can also convey information. P5JS gave me a new form of creation, and the works are no longer created by me alone. The interactive experiences provided by P5JS allows users to also participate in the creation process, and the translation from 2D images to 3D animations also creates a different visual experiences.
I'm Jennifer Stewart, a graphic designer, educator, and graduate student. As part of the Texas State Generative Design class, I developed this interactive typography project, exploring type design by randomly assigning typefaces to a grid. Grid type was inspired by the grid-based type creations of Wim Kroll and Susanna Letko. In a previous project, I made a mock exhibition that played with grid-based type concepts. I generated a logo for the exhibition that combined these type designs into a single form. While exploring generative design using P5JS, I discovered how randomness reveals unexpected and unconventional, yet surprisingly functional design outcomes. The type combinations from the Kroll and Letko project already have a randomly generated feel, leading naturally to actual true generative design. The program segments user input and arbitrarily assigns type to an underlying grid structure. It allows the user to click on the grid cells and cycle through the loaded typefaces and ultimately control the final design. The user can also choose to alter the color of the background and text to further tweak the design. For the first use of this tool, I provided the prompt, "Good design is," as a play on the subjectively irregular design of the Frankensteinian type creations, allowing users to input their own responses and open a dialogue. I shared this tool with my students who generated unique responses, and the outcomes provided a nice snapshot of their feelings about design culture today, ultimately allowing the user to become part of the finished work.
All right, thank you. And we have the next presentation by Yeon An. Let me open our presentation. Good. Right, there we go. Oh, wait a second. Sorry. Oh, we should share the desk. Sorry for the technical difficulties. Here we go.
Hey. So thank you so much for attending my presentation today. My name is Yeon An. Today I will talk about the Bible plus code series. I'm an assistant professor of graphic design and interaction design in the art department at UW Medicine. Have you heard about the Bible? Yes. The Bible is a collection of sacred texts or scriptures. It is a product of divine inspiration and a record of the relationship between God and humans for Christians, Jews, and Samaritans. It has had a tremendous influence on literature and history in the Western world. It is one of the most influential and best-selling books of all the time. The Bible plus Code series is a collection of a visual journey to explore the philosophical and religious meanings of my life through the scriptures, using creative coding and typography. I had a heart attack unexpectedly in 2010. Now I have a stent in my coronary artery. Also, I'm diabetic. It took almost 1 year to recover my body condition. During my cardiac rehab program, I created numerous typographies in web with coding directly because I did not have sufficient physical strength to use traditional mediums. This is a cross with the subtitle Hope. As a graphic artist, when I was on the way of hitting the top of my career at 35 years old, I fell down from top to bottom with a heart attack. Cardiac rehab program took almost 1 year to recover my body condition. It was a long and painful process to endure with an uncertain future. I was thinking of being dead, old age, since I didn't know where I should start again. But one day, my eyes did catch a moment, cross penetrating through tree branches and leaves above me. That was hope. It is from Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 1. To everything there is a season. It is inspired by the Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 1. To everything there is a season. I believe that life has seasons. It has spring, summer, fall, winter, and spring again at the circle. It was my note in 2011 regarding this typography. At my age, 35 years old, I suffered from heart disease. I thought that my life might be in the winter. I designed this typography with my hope that I would recover just as the spring comes again every year. If you see this typography, it starts from the winter, go to spring, because at the time my body condition was in the winter. It is from the second Corinthians chapter 12, verse 1. It's also famous scripture. My grace is sufficient for you. But God said to me, my grace is sufficient for you. For my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more greatly about my weakness, so that Christ's power may rest on me. It is one of the most challenging generative typography in my life. I spent almost 2.5 years to finalize it, since I started creating and ended up with unfinished numerous sketches in processing, because I was still immature religiously to visualize the meaning of grace in my life. According to Brian Jones, Executive Director of Campus Ministries at Valparaiso University, grace is a center of Christian faith, which I haven't knew until 2016. This project ended up with my commissioned project, O Antiphon. O Antiphon plus Code is a collection. It's a collaboration with the Chapel of Resurrection and Integrated Marketing Center at Valparaiso University. It is a computational typography for Advent Christmas Vesper in 2016. All antiphons used ancient biblical imagery from the Old Testament's messianic hopes to proclaim the coming Messiah. So if you see that this O Adonai is Hebrew, in English is O Lord, and O Key of David indicate the king, David, in the Old Testament. The king is a biblical figure to open the door from the Old Testament to go to the New Testament. That's why I use a image of the king. I'm gonna go to the next one. Also, is O root of Jesse, O day of spring. And this is generative motion graphic, O Emmanuel. In English, O God with us. So I'm visualizing the image that God is holding us. That's O God with us. That means O Emmanuel. I'm gonna put the next one. The Bible class code. Interestingly, I was not sure where I have to exhibit this piece. And I had a solo exhibition opportunity at Duluth College in Iowa. It was my solo exhibition. I'm gonna go to the next one. Even Flowers, it's one of the famous typography, this one. And I was inspired by a Korean Christian contemporary music, Even Flowers. 이곳에 생명샘 수차랑 눈물 골짜기 지나갈 때 머지않아 열매 맺히고 웃음소리 넘치나이다. In Korean, a fountain of life springs up here. When tears down, sooner or later, it will bear fruit. I cannot read all that because of my time is limited. I'm gonna go to the next one. It was my inspiration for this floral typography, and also I had a second solo exhibition at Trinity International University in 2019. And I'm gonna go to the next one. That is a process that if you see that it's very simple code, screen side, background, and translate full statement to create flowers like this using translate and scale function that I can randomize the scale of the flowers. And also I can bring complexity and density with coding directly. Also, I embedded the directly from plural typography into the letter form apps. Also, this is a flower and it's using a system algorithm to visualize a tree by using flowers. Also, I created an immersive experience by using computer vision to have the audience experience augmented reality with this project. I'm going to go to the next one. And another famous scripture. And now these three remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. This is my typography, inspired by the scripture. I'm going to go to the next one. Genesis. Have you heard about Genesis? Yes. So this is the beginning. Bible is a collection of the book that it's in the beginning God creating the. So if you see the scripture in Genesis, and God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. It expressed the moment of the beginning of the creation by the word. Also, I was inspired by the book of Job in the Old Testament. Perseverance is a steadfastness in doing something despite difficulty or delay in achieving success. Forgiveness. During my academic journey, in some degree, I have been mistreated and underappreciated as a woman or minority faculty in America and South Korea. I have learned about forgiveness through life, that is not forgiving someone, but embracing and opening your heart to whom you cannot understand and who hurt you. According to Paul Bosis, forgiveness does not change the past, but it does enlarge the future. You can embrace future with forgiveness. And Psalm 23 is a famous scripture. The Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pasture. He leads me beside quiet water. I cannot read all. I'm gonna go to the verse 4. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. I'm gonna go to. So at the beginning, I started using the scripture directly to create expressive typography. Then I started using the letter A, B, C, D. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. That is my typography inspired by Psalm 23. And my cup overflow. So I need to finalize my presentation. I was thinking how to finalize this presentation. Love never gives up. never lose faith, is always hopeful, and endure through every circumstance. I want to finalize my presentation with hope. That's my presentation today. Thank you so much for your attendance to listen to my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you for wonderful presentations. We do have time for Q&A. So do you have any questions in this room? Oh, yep, wait a second. I'll change the display setting. Okay.
Yes.
If you have a question, you can in this room, you can also just ask, or if on virtual the guest, if you do have any questions, please unmute yourself, and also you can ask question as well. Let me check the chat. All right, I think we can start with the first question. Chagall, you asked, I think it's for Mihan and her student. I wonder though, how this impact readability and accessibility. I think it was for the grid type, I believe. Is the student here or?
Yeah, I think it applies to Jennifer and Kat.
I don't know how to answer it for grid type. For the purpose of the project, I was just looking at creating something that was unique and that allowed for the randomness of P5JS to interact with the type. I imagine it's actually not very legible, but it was expressive, and so I think for that reason it's okay. I don't know if a tool like this could be used to help with accessibility in the future, or if there's a way to make some pieces more legible and accessible, but that's a really good question. So I don't know, Sibel, how to exactly answer that.
Can I just, I don't know. I was trying to, sorry. No, I totally appreciate that. And I know that it's an artistic expression. We had an interesting presentation of a student last week at the conference, and she was actually showing how people with different abilities view things. And I could almost see it working in reverse, where it, you know, created different things and then came into focus somehow. It's beautiful, but I always struggle with the artistic expressions and then, you know, making that accessible. So anyway, I was just curious.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any question in this room? Or panelists, do you have questions for the other panelists?
I have a question for Professor An. So I don't know if where she is, but so your work has a lot of really beautiful visual texture. And I'm actually really curious about your creative process. So before you start creating coding, do you have something in your mind, what you are trying to achieve? Or is it more like accidental outcome and you kind of building the same code again and again and create different outcomes? I'm curious about your creative process.
That's an excellent question. Thank you for asking me. I think we are using yes. Most of designers who don't have a strong background in computer science have a tendency to rely on just a random effect that but if you check my career, that I have a background in computer science and 2 MFAs in graphic design, that when I create typography, it starts from conceptualization and visualization and development process. It's a highly structured process that how I do. I have idea sketches, and next step is we need to do the research about visualization using simple code or existing libraries and algorithms that we need to utilize to visualize conceptually what we are planning. Then development process. That's the typical process that, yes, I have a highly structured planned or creative process from the beginning. Thank you for the question.
Right, and we have a question from Chris. It can be difficult to become skilled in coding to express one's ideas. How did each of you build your own coding skills? And from that experience, what do you bring to your teaching? As a side, I love how personal many of the projects are, which may be counterintuitive when they are programmatic. Anyone want to answer this question?
Yeah, I can answer this one first. So I don't come from a programming background. I was in design school. I'm also old enough and from a small enough town that I hadn't used a computer before I went to undergrad to be a graphic designer. So I'm learning these graphic design programs, and then I'm finding that I'm really intrigued by all the things that I can do with code, building little websites, teaching myself programming. And so part of how I got into it was by not being afraid to make mistakes. I realized there's like nothing permanent. You write code, it breaks, you delete it and start again. And it wasn't really ever a problem. And I think that's really useful. The other thing is I figured out that I developed tactics for troubleshooting and realized that most of code is troubleshooting. And so for me, it is very much sort of experimental. So when it comes to the second part of that question, bringing it into my teaching, one of the things that I try to reinforce to my classes, my students, my workshops, my collaborators, is that you can do a lot with very little if you just are brave enough to play with it and break it and iterate and try again. And so when I bring it into classrooms and workshops, I really reinforce this idea that we are not learning all of code. We're approaching it like we do language. When we're little, we have very few resources to describe what we want. We scream and we cry because we're hungry and we're thirsty. Then eventually we learn like 1 or 2 words. So we can say water, and then eventually we're like, no, you have to say water, please. And so now we start developing more complicated things. But before we can write paragraph essays and books, we learn words, and then we learn sentences. And all along, we're still trying to communicate basic stuff. And I see programming is the same way. So I try to show in my workshops those very first few things that are like, oh, after 20 minutes, you're making cool stuff. And from there, it's about sort of expanding and exploring.
So, Mihyun, do you have something to say?
So my class, so that was the first time that the MFA program run generative design. So we had 3 projects, and each students actually have their thesis topic. So I gave them a series of workshops. So first week is all about teaching code. And then maybe second, third week, I strongly encourage them to implement their thesis idea into their code. And as Alex said, they were so good. Like I taught them very basic baby steps, and they were able to walk. And at the end, they were able to even run. So on the third project, I really didn't teach much coding. And first project was always a big one. And there are a lot of exercises they had to do. But I think it's like learning building block. Once you know how things work, they can do so much with such a simple code.
Can I answer the question?
Sure. So Yohyun, if you want to say it.
Yeah, thank you, Mihyun, to sharing your experience of teaching creative coding. That My experience of teaching creative coding, that I started teaching typography and code in the Visual Communication and Design Department at School of Art Institute of Chicago in 2012. It's almost 10 years of teaching experience for creative coding, particularly for graphic art and visual communication design, that my teaching is evolving, because at the beginning when I taught, that it was more like a comprehensive, immersive experience, let them control more. But now, particularly how I can share my research activities with my students, that we had a student a presentation from Josephine Hotrara at the beginning of the presentation, that I try to provide my experience, how artists and designers will be more efficiently adapt expressive visualization. So I don't use the same structure, but I change frequently, almost every other year, to just to share my experience, how art and design majors would be efficiently and accessibly to learn coding without hesitation and fear.
Thank you, Yohan. And we do have questions in the chat from Michael. Alex, what coding language are you using?
For the work that I shared, that's in processing both as Java and P5.js. It also uses Touch Designer in that work. But other things that I do also use Max MSP and Open Frameworks quite a bit, along with PHP and some other web frameworks.
Okay, thank you. And Ting, I'm not sure who this question. I'm not sure who this question is for, which presenter. Do you also make physical work through a similarly experimentally artistic way that you are coding in?
Can I answer?
Sure.
Yes. One of my class projects is using this type of application from creative coding directly to convert to PDF, or using laser coding or 3D printing to create more tangible experience from creative coding. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, and a lot of the stuff that becomes physical will come out in printed form. So I just, for example, taught a class where students were processing sound and generating vector results, and then presenting them as printed assets in a gallery in a variety of different ways.
Mihyun or other MFA candidate, do you have an answer for this one?
I think Chen Yao's work, I don't know Chen Yao here.
I saw the name here.
Yeah, he's the one who did this kind of pottery, the motion, interactive, participatory piece with emotions.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, during the critique, we talk about making it as a 3D print. Yeah, I think that those work, I completely see that in 3D prints.
Okay. Actually, I have a question for the MFA candidates, because like hopefully they have a chance to speak about their experience. So did you have a special motivation to start using creative coding in your practice? Like my personal experience, my professor asked me, like, you should do it before it gets too late. That was my motivation. So for you guys, do you have any special motivation? And have you changed it, like after taking this class, do you change your stereotype, or how you have changed it after your experience with creative coding? Anyone who want to share it? I know Catherine, Jennifer, and Shenya, you're here, so feel free to unmute yourself and feel free to share your experience.
So for me, I wanted to explore outside the traditional graphic design because a year ago I was working as a dietitian in the outpatient setting, and I was making lots of handouts, like traditional print designs. So I was inspired to go back into the MFA program and start something different. And when they had said that they were offering the gender code, you know, I felt like it was something like different. So I was motivated in that way to try something different, like outside of just like print design.
Thank you. Jennifer, do you want to add anything?
For me, it was just an opportunity to try something different as well. One thing that kind of came to light was the fact that it let you, like Alex was saying, you get to let go of a little control, and it's kind of liberating, and that you just kind of let it happen. You do have control in the beginning when you input your information, but I see myself kind of continuing with this and trying some new things. And I'm really glad that Mignon put this class forward for us to try this semester. And I hope it continues to be something that's offered. But yeah, one thing I did want to say earlier with code too, with P5JS, one thing that's wonderful about this environment is everything. There's so much stuff out there open source to try. So you can just go, once you know the structure, you just go grab bits and pieces of things and kind of put it together, and it's not scary. So if some of you have wanted to try this, then just jump in.
Great, thank you. And we have one last question, and one of the panelists, if you can answer this question, it'll be great. From David, to any panelist, does coding help teach and cultivate the virtue of patience? Perhaps coding is the less immediate. And thank you. So anyone wanna answer this question? And it's a very interesting question, but also it's not, it's really tricky to answer as well.
Can I answer? Beyond just basic programming languages like processing P5, JavaScript, and PHP, or advanced programming languages, C++, Java, that even HTML, when we learn, we need to be patient. Because I teach interactive media for graphic design, it's an advanced level web design, design and development course that definitely every semester we have students be patient to learn about being patient through working with HTML and CSS. That's how I want to share. Yes.
Yeah, I was going to say, in addition to like patience and curiosity at sort of a different at a different rate, it also, we talk a lot about design as problem solving. It forces us and students to flex different kinds of problem solving muscles, and that all plays back into how you're looking at issues, how you're looking at things that aren't working, how you're looking at systems, whether that's some code that doesn't work, or whether that's messages and platforms and formats that are just missing their audience. It's all interconnected in a variety of ways.
Yeah, even like Siri won't understand our natural languages, and then we want them computer to do very specific things. And even you talk to someone, hey, would you please do something? People even don't understand completely as well. Definitely, we do need a patience for communication and everything. By the way, thank you very much for your time joining this panel, and thanks for the panelists. And also, thank you for everyone here.